Everyone couldn't understand why my parents didn't want me to continue schooling, despite everything being presented to me free of charge. I told everyone that I wasn't going to let go of the scholarship. Then you must choose. You either forego that scholarship and every plan to further your education, or join us and become a great farmer. Just look at us. We went to school, but the system failed us, and we never got decent jobs. Trust me, schooling won't take you anywhere. I refused the latter. Before everyone, they shamelessly asked me to go home, get my things, and leave their house. That's unfair. Where do you want a young boy like him to go?
We don't care. If he's not going to listen to us, that only means he's grown enough. And a grown man should look after himself.
We can't have a son like him in our house. He'll kill us one day. In tears, I returned home and packed a small bag. Hi, my name is Zane. I was born in the countryside, and my parents were farmers. They made their living from selling crops and animals. We also fed on them. My parents weren't fans of education. It was confusing because they'd gone to school. In fact, my dad had a certificate in business, while my mom had studied nursing. It always remained a mystery to me how they both ended up being farmers. Since they weren't fans of education, they didn't think it was important for me to go to school. They believed it was important to be educated on the farm instead. It wasn't until I was age 3 before my parents finally allowed me to go to school. No, it wasn't out of their own will. It was because our neighbors were gossiping about it. While other kids went to school, I was at the farm. The other parents thought it was stupid and unwise on the part of my parents. They'd even be bold enough to confront them about it.
Don't you think he's too young to be a farmer? What is he going to do when he grows and his peers are smarter than him?
I can't believe you're both intentionally destroying his future. He can be educated and still learn to farm. You both are going to make life so difficult for the poor thing.
It didn't stop there. As if planned, whenever the women came across my parents, they would remind them of the need for education. I became a hot topic in the whole town. My dad's friends weren't having it either. They were also farmers, but they didn't deny their kids education. Whenever they hung out, all they would talk about was their kids at school. My dad would sit quietly, unable to say anything. I was too young and didn't understand what was going on. But now, I feel grateful to those people. After months of them talking to my parents, I was finally registered to school 2 months before my 4th birthday. I felt so excited on my first day. I saw new faces, new places, and learned new things. It was like a different world, and at the end of the day, I really didn't want to return home. You'd have thought my parents would make me leave farming for school. Well, nope. I still had to farm. It continued until I was 15. By then, I'd grown into a very handsome and intelligent teenager. My school was so proud and confident in me. Whenever the school had a competition, I was always the first to be picked. Of course, I never failed to bring back the best of the trophies. I didn't stop farming. In fact, I'd gotten so good that my dad was able to leave some of the farming to me and attend to other things. I wasn't complaining. I loved farming just as much as I loved being in school. My intelligence was famous around the town. There were always so many loud cheers whenever I entered venues to compete. Those gave me confidence to be myself and bring my town and the school respect. I wrote my final exams for high school a month after my 15th birthday. I wasn't even a tiny bit scared about failing, as I was sure I would pass. One day, while awaiting my results, I saw a few of my classmates running toward me in the farm. I was both confused and scared. Suddenly, as they stopped before me, they all pulled me into a hug, congratulating me. I didn't understand what was happening, neither did my parents. After the hug, I was told that I'd gotten a scholarship from the government. They were immensely impressed with how well I did and promised to sponsor my education throughout college. They also promised a job immediately after my education. I was out of words. I stood there like a frozen chicken, not knowing what to say or do. Suddenly, my mom spoke.
Go back to the school and tell the school's principal that Zane won't be taking the scholarship. He doesn't need it.
Tell him to ask the government to give it to someone else. Our son doesn't need it. But I need it. I need the scholarship to further my education. You've both been talking about not having money to take me to college. This is an opportunity, and you want me to throw it away just like that? I was reprimanded by them, followed by a slap from my mom that sent me to the floor. My classmates had to leave. Once they were gone, I faced my parents with tears in my eyes. That scholarship was right in my grip. How could you let me lose it? They're helping us. It's not what I'm going to benefit from alone. How could you do this to me? I was in pain. I felt like my life had been destroyed. I broke down crying, but all my parents did was to grab their tools to go back to farming.
Your education ends here. We never plan to allow you to go further. When you're done crying, join us.
I was filled with rage. I'd been farming my whole life. It was a struggle for me to combine both farming and schooling, but I'd managed to do so for over 10 years. I refuse. I refuse to farm any longer. I want to go to school. I'm going to take the scholarship and go to school. My parents' eyes reddened with anger as they saw how stubborn I was about it. I stood my ground as they tried to force me to pick up my tools. I tightened my fists, refusing to grab anything. They were pulling me toward the ground, but with all of my strength, I made it hard for them. It was a real battle. My mom suddenly hit me in my back with her elbow, forcing a loud cry from my lips. I was getting weak, but I refused to let them win. The people around heard my scream. Luckily, some of them came to check where the scream came from. Seeing the scene, they quickly stepped in and freed me from my parents. How can you engage in such fights with your child? You're both so cruel.
I've always said that not everyone deserves the title of a parent. You're both irresponsible.
He's being disobedient. He initiated the fight. He threatened to kill us and tell you all that we died in our sleep. He's evil.
That's a lie. I didn't say that. It hurt how they could concoct such lies. I went ahead to explain things to everyone. In tears, I told them how my parents had planned to stop my education despite the fact that I'd been granted a scholarship to help me through my college life. I was even promised a job after college. Everyone couldn't understand why my parents didn't want me to continue schooling, despite everything being presented to me free of charge. I told everyone that I wasn't going to let go of the scholarship. Then you must choose. You either forego that scholarship and every plan to further your education, or join us and become a great farmer. Just look at us. We went to school, but the system failed us, and we never got decent jobs. Trust me, schooling won't take you anywhere. I refused the latter. Before everyone, they shamelessly asked me to go home, get my things, and leave their house. That's unfair. Where do you want a young boy like him to go?
We don't care. If he's not going to listen to us, that only means he's grown enough. And a grown man should look after himself.
We can't have a son like him in our house. He'll kill us one day. In tears, I returned home and packed a small bag. I only took what I needed and left. Firstly, I headed straight to the school where I let the principal know that I was going to take the scholarship. He was more than happy. I filled the required forms, answered a few questions, and signed in, required places before I left. The only place I could go to was my aunt's home. She lived in the next town. She used to stay with my parents after the death of her mom, who was my mom's mother. But my parents stopped her from going to school after 18. She'd run away from our home and gone to start her life alone. I'd never visited her, but I knew where she lived because I once heard my parents talking about it. When I finally got to her home and explained things to her, she was so disappointed in my parents. I was surprised to see the mansion she lived in and her 3 cars. According to her, she'd struggled hard to attain her current level after running away. She'd gone back to school after doing countless menial jobs. After hearing her story, I was determined to be like her. My aunt helped me so much. I was like her son, and she treated me so well. Luckily, the university was in the same town as the one we lived in. The years passed by quickly, and I was finally done. The job promised was given to me, and I was able to stop my aunt from working and placed her on a monthly salary. She was so elated. Unfortunately, tragedy struck 1 year later when my aunt died in her sleep. It left me so sad and hurt, as she'd played the role of parents in my whole 20 years of staying with her. I wanted to give her a befitting burial. I invited our friends and people around. After her body was cremated, I invited everyone hoped for us to pay her respect one last time. Shockingly, while people were walking in, I sighted my parents too. I was shocked, seeing how old and tattered they looked. I ignored and pretended as if I hadn't seen them. After the respect was given to my aunt, I began sharing expensive clothes, money, and food items to everyone around. It was the least I could do to honor my aunt. While at it, my parents suddenly approached me. I didn't act shocked or even angry. I maintained an emotionless face.
We heard you now have a good job. We're suffering, Zane. You should help us. We birthed you after all. Give us food and money, too.
The neighbors burnt down our house, set the chickens free, and let pests into our farmlands. All of that happened after rumors spread we kicked you out because we never wanted you to be educated. You owe us, Zane. No, I owe you both nothing. The neighbors did to y'all what you deserve. You're such a worthless child. Your parents sleep in a little house and can barely feed well. How can you say we deserve it?
If you don't help us, we're going to take this mansion and leave you with nothing. After all, she's my sister and I own whatever she owns.
I couldn't help but burst into laughter. They were so stupidly entitled that I'd begun to find it funny. Well, my aunt had written in her will that this house belongs to me. All of the $1 million in her account belongs to me. In fact, all of her properties are mine. Now, if you like yourselves, get out of my house before I lose my cool. They were both shocked to their bones, but still refused to leave. By now, everyone around had turned their attention to us. Someone asked who they were, and I told them. Everyone couldn't understand why I wanted them out. When I explained everything to them, including how they threatened to take the house from me, everyone insulted them for being cruel and shameless. 4 of them even stood up and helped me drag my parents outside. Just before slamming the door to their faces, I spoke to them. If either of you steps foot here again, I'm going to call the cops and report you for stalking and disturbance. Dare me. I slammed the door shut and returned to what I was doing before their arrival. They returned home to their small house, while I started a company with part of the money my aunt left me. A few months later, I heard that a snake had bitten my mom and she had died, leaving my dad suffering all alone. I didn't care, and several times he tried reaching out to me by calling, but I blocked him and even placed a restraining order against him. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
I came across my sister's page and saw that she was on a wheelchair. She was also in tears. According to her story, she'd gotten into an accident which almost claimed her life. She'd luckily survived, but would be needing surgery to help her walk again. She'd set up a GoFundMe, requesting help from people. I cried so much when I saw the video. My parents hadn't told me anything. I felt so abandoned and resolved to confront them when they returned home. You can imagine my shock when they walked into the house that night with my sister, who was looking completely fine. How are you walking well? In your video, you said you needed surgery to walk. What's going on?
Oh, shut up. If you dare say a word about this to anyone, I'll kill you myself.
I'm doing this to make Mom and Dad proud. I'm making them money. More than you'll ever make in your entire life.
If this information gets out of this house, I won't let your mother kill you. I'll do it myself.
I was scared, betrayed, shocked. Hey there. I'm Annie, 28 years old, and I've been living on my own since I turned 21. It was a decision I made after a particularly tough year following my 20th birthday, and looking back, I've never regretted it. From the very beginning, it was evident that I had a knack for academics. Teachers favored me for my diligence and quick understanding of lessons. I held on to my position as the top student with pride, but little did I know that it would soon become a source of isolation and pain. My elder sister Stacy was 2 years older, but only 1 class ahead of me. When I got into senior high school, things took a sharp turn for the worse. My academic success made me a target for jealousy and resentment among my peers and sister as well. Because I often topped the class, my sister hated me for no reason. My peers shunned me, spoke ill of me behind my back, and refused to engage with me in any meaningful way. I vividly remember being the only student sitting alone in class, surrounded by an invisible wall of hostility and exclusion. You might wonder if my sister, being my closest companion at school, offered any support. Sadly, it was quite the opposite. My sister was stunningly beautiful, a fact that she never let me forget. Her looks drew attention and admiration effortlessly, making her the darling of our peers. From our early years in junior secondary school, she distanced herself from me. At first, I struggled with the rejection, hoping that family ties would prevail over popularity contests. Yet, as time passed, I grew accustomed to her indifference and the hurt it caused. By the time I entered high school, her behavior towards me had turned openly hostile. She joined in the taunts and mockery that I endured from others, using her influence to amplify the isolation I felt. Her betrayal cut me so deeply, leaving me grappling with a sense of abandonment and betrayal from someone I had once trusted implicitly. When we were little, my sister and I were best friends. She always liked it when we played together and when our parents bought us matching clothes. She'd refuse to go anywhere if I wasn't going. My grandparents used to say we were inseparable siblings. You can understand my pain after her sudden change toward me. You would think she was different at home, but she was just the same. She would scream at me at the slightest provocation. She would even hit me for the littlest mistake and tell me how bad and unfortunate I was. Once, while my parents were away, I tried cooking something for us. I wanted to make her feel good, and maybe like me. Knowing she was a foodie, I opted to use food. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't a great cook. I tried, but the only good thing about the meal was the love and care I'd put into it. I was going to trash the food because I knew it wasn't good. But before I could do that, my sister caught me. In tears, I apologized to her and explained what I attempted to do. Against my wish, she tasted the food and smiled. She kept the food to show to my parents once they were home. I was so scared because we both knew my parents were against food wastage. I begged her in tears, but she refused to listen. She swore to make me pay for wasting food. When my parents returned home and heard about it, they were livid. I explained what my intentions were, but it was disregarded. My parents hit me. That was the first of the many times they hit me after believing my sister over me. With no one on my side, both at school and at home, I threw myself into my studies as a refuge, seeking solace in the pursuit of knowledge where judgment was based on merit, not popularity. Teachers continued to commend my efforts, but their praise offered little comfort in the face of relentless hatred from my peers. Outside of school, I found peace in my loneliness. Books became my constant companions. Finally, we graduated from high school. My parents had tried to get us matching outfits for graduation, but Stacy refused. According to her, we weren't kids, and her friends would mock her for that. I was willing to match with her. However, my opinion wasn't demanded. We ended up getting different outfits, and of course, my sister got the prettier one while I got a casual one. Graduation was over, and we got into college. Again, my sister's beauty got her more popularity. There weren't bullies in college. They liked me. They liked how brilliant I was and tried to associate with me. I guess seeing that angered my sister. She hated that I was getting attention, nearly as much as her. I suppose that was the reason she began running a YouTube channel. At first, her videos were fashion-oriented. She managed to gather quite a lot of subscribers as a result of her beauty and great fashion sense. She expanded to other social media platforms where she also gained recognition.
Watch out. I'm going to get so rich and no one will be interested in your stupid brain anymore.
She often boasted like that. Honestly, I wasn't interested in the popularity. All I wanted was to peacefully graduate college and get a job better than the part-time one I was doing. With the money she gained from social media after a year, my sister moved out of the house at age 22. She'd truly gotten rich. She got my parents a car and even helped renovate the house, excluding my room.
You could use your brain to get yourself money and make your room look better.
I felt bad, but I didn't dwell on it for long. I had done nothing to offend her, but I refused to hold grudges against her. I was never allowed to visit her home. My parents also refused to disclose her address.
You know your sister doesn't like you. I think it's better you don't bug her.
Your mom is right. Personally, we think it's better this way. We don't want you causing trouble for her.
I felt disappointed in my parents for supporting her mistreatment toward me, but I didn't complain. I stopped asking about her and simply let things go their own way. Shockingly, 4 months later, I came across my sister's page and saw that she was on a wheelchair. She was also in tears. According to her story, she'd gotten into an accident which almost claimed her life. She'd luckily survived, but would be needing surgery to help her walk again. She'd set up a GoFundMe, requesting help from people. I cried so much when I saw the video. My parents hadn't told me anything. I felt so abandoned and resolved to confront them when they returned home. You can imagine my shock when they walked into the house that night with my sister, who was looking completely fine. How are you walking well? In your video, you said you needed surgery to walk. What's going on?
Oh, shut up. If you dare say a word about this to anyone, I'll kill you myself.
I'm doing this to make Mom and Dad proud. I'm making them money. More than you'll ever make in your entire life.
If this information gets out of this house, I won't let your mother kill you. I'll do it myself.
I was scared, betrayed, shocked. I felt like a stranger to my own family. I promised not to say anything. However, just 3 days later, my sister released a video. She was crying even more. In the video, she told everyone how she'd gotten into another accident.
I caught my sister in bed with my boyfriend. I felt so hurt and betrayed. While I was driving away in tears, that's when the accident happened.
If I wasn't her sister, I would have believed. She sounded so real. Tears rolled down my eyes as I read the comments. Everyone was talking down on me. I was being called a hater, homewrecker, bad sister, among other vile names. I cried so much that I nearly passed out. The next day, calls began to come in from those at school who recognized her. It was so embarrassing and hurtful to hear everyone bashing me for my sister's lies. I couldn't even go to college anymore, out of fear. Everyone, both strangers and acquaintances, turned against me. That earned Stacy even more pity. She got more money from the public. I felt so bad because even my parents were in support of her actions. No one considered my feelings. Blogs soon began sharing the video. They tagged me different bad names and painted me so evil. Seeing all of that turned my feelings to pure rage. I was determined to get back at her. Firstly, with the money I'd been saving, I went to rent a comfortable apartment far from them without their idea. My aim was to get back at my sister. After another week, I was able to locate her house. I waited for the right time to strike. Luckily, it came after another week. That day, I overheard my parents talking about having dinner with my sister. Once she arrived, I left the house and rushed to hers. I'd figured out where she kept her spare key, so I took it and went in. I hid behind her couch and waited. She didn't return until 2 hours later. Once I heard her car drive in, I started a live video. Hi everyone. I'm Annie, Stacy's younger sister. I'm here to prove to you all that she's nothing but a faker and a liar. She didn't get into any accident. I'm at her house now, and I'm going to prove it to you all. More people tuned in. Soon, Stacy walked into the house and turned on the lights. I immediately came out of my hiding place and directed the camera to her. She froze in shock. Can you all see? She's hale and hearty. She's lying against me because she hates me. She's faking her condition to extort money from you all. Our parents are also in on it. It's their plan to make you all pity her and take your money. My sister screamed and tried to fight me to take the phone from me, but I refused to back off. I pushed her and dashed out of the house. After locking her in, I called the police. They swiftly came and she was arrested. The news immediately went viral. Everyone on the internet was supporting her arrest. They requested my bank account details to aid with sending her to jail, and I released it. With the money, I pressed charges against Stacy. She was charged with fraud, defamation of character, money extortion, and deceiving the public. That got her 15 years in jail. Some of those on the internet were present on the day of her trial. The money she got from them was going to be given back to the public. However, they refused and insisted that the money be given to me instead. I got so emotional and burst into tears. They all felt like they owed me after all the insults and curses they hurled at me, and that was the only way they could get my forgiveness. Meanwhile, the neighbors had heard about it and stormed my parents' house. They burnt down the house, and my parents had been dragged all the way to the police station after getting mercilessly beaten. They both got 10 years jail term each for being accomplices to their daughter's deceit. As the cops dragged them to the bus, people threw eggs, water, and curses on them. People took videos of them, which went viral too. My classmates from college called to apologize for what they said. With the money I got, I was able to finish college, attend a cooking academy, and establish my own restaurant. It's been 7 years, and I've managed to establish 3 more restaurants, all of which are doing incredibly well. I haven't heard about my family, and I haven't cared to check. I feel happier not knowing about them, and it will remain that way. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel.
The police dragged him away, and then we followed the signal to the other AirTag, which led straight to Freddy's car. After some effort, the police managed to break into his truck, and we saw that much like Tim's locker that the trunk was full of stolen goods along with illegal steroids. As the police were combing through the items inside the trunk, Freddy came outside and saw the police. As quickly as he could, he leapt into his car and started it up and tried to race away. The police jumped into their cars and chased after him, and he led them on a wild car chase for a couple hours that ended with him crashing his car. He was then taken into custody. Hi there, my name is Evan, and I have a story about a bully that I wanted to share with you. The bully in question was Freddy. He was this massive muscle guy that would come to the local gym that I went to, and no one there liked him. He basically acted like a complete jerk to everyone else that had the misfortune to work out at the same time that he was there. He never really picked on me much, but he did make a point to harass people, especially couples that would work out together. Freddy would constantly go up to couples and pick on them since he was so much bigger than most of the other men that attended our gym. He was tall and looked like a world-class bodybuilder, so he was very intimidating. Oh look, if it isn't one of the scrawniest and weak little men to ever come into this gym. Bud, why do you even bother? You've been coming here for a couple years now and you haven't gained any muscle mass at all. Leave me alone, Freddy. I don't come here just to build muscles. I prefer long-distance running anyways. Only a loser like you would say something as pathetic as that. Women only want men like me with big muscles and everyone knows it. But fine, I'll just go and talk to your girlfriend then. She'll be interested in what I have to say. Leave her alone, Freddy. Why do you always have to be such a jerk? Can't you just leave people alone so they can work out in peace and quiet? You better watch your mouth, little man, or else I'll pound your face in. No one asked you. Of course, Freddy was mostly just talk. He never actually hit anyone, but he did push people around or shove them off equipment that he wanted to use. The real problem was that even if anyone complained about him to the workers at the gym, nothing would come of it. Freddy had a friend, Tim, that worked there, and amazingly, every time there was a dispute, the videotapes of the gym would suddenly stop working. So if anyone ever complained, it was always their word against his. Over time, though, it began to get worse. There were times when Freddy would pretend that it was an accident, but he would walk into the women's changing room, and women swore that he even tried to take photos of women while they were changing. He had been caught a few times, but he always swore that it was all a big misunderstanding, and when his friend Tim would cover for him and just make the whole situation disappear. Usually by giving people free smoothies or free time at the gym. However, it was quickly getting to be too much. The final straw came when things from the men's locker room started to go missing. So the lockers in the changing rooms were on the honor system and didn't have padlocks on them. And like a fool, I and many other people had assumed that anything left in the lockers would be safe as we felt that we could trust one another. But then things began to disappear. For me, it was a pair of wireless earbuds that I had left in my locker while I went swimming, and when I came back to change, they were gone. I reported them missing to the staff, but no one ever came forward with finding them. However, I was convinced that I saw Freddy using them the next time I was in the gym. I couldn't prove for certain that they were mine, but I just knew. Other people reported money going missing from their wallets that they left in the lockers, or a watch or jewelry even. None of it was ever found, and while no one came out directly and said it, it was very obvious who the culprit was. We were all very frustrated, especially since we knew that nothing was going to be done. However, one day, I had had enough. I stupidly wore a watch that my father had given me before he passed away to go to the gym, and I didn't want it damaged when I went swimming, and so I left in my locker. A couple hours later, I went in the changing room to get dressed and head home, and found my locker open and everything in it gone. I asked at the head desk and spoke with Tim. Hey, sorry, but there are no cameras in the changing rooms. I'll keep an eye out if anyone finds it, but that's the best I can do. Well, that isn't good enough. That watch was incredibly important to me. I demand that you do something. Well, you can demand all you want to, but that won't change anything. There's nothing I can or will do. Sorry, bud, but you just have to accept that it's gone. I was beyond furious, and I was finally at the point where I was ready to do something. You may ask why I didn't just go to another gym. Well, sadly in my town, there are no other gyms. And yes, I could buy some equipment and work out at home, but that is too expensive, and I feel much more motivated to work out when I go to the gym. At any rate, I contacted a friend of mine, Stacy. Stacy was in between jobs, and I asked if she would be willing to do me a favor and apply to work at the gym. She was curious, and when I told her why, she figured that it could be fun for her, so she applied, and they ended up hiring her. Now it was only a matter of time to wait until Freddie and Tim did something, and we didn't have to wait very long. Within 2 weeks of Stacy starting to work at the gym, Freddie had harassed and assaulted over a dozen different gym members. Of course, Tim said that the cameras hadn't caught any of the behavior, and so they had just assumed that it was business as usual. But what they didn't know was that I had told Stacy to make copies of the recordings for the video cameras, and she had gotten to them before Tim could. She gave me copies of the recordings, and I held on to them. I had wanted Tim fired and Freddie to finally be kicked out of the gym, but I knew that some recordings wouldn't be enough, and so I bought some AirTags and hid one of them in a watch I bought, as well as another in a laptop, and left both in my locker when I went swimming. Sure, enough when I finished and headed back to the locker room. Both were missing. Rather than telling Tim that I had once again been the target of theft, I instead called up the police, and when they showed up, I told them about the AirTags. We started following the signals from the tags, but both led to different locations. The first led us to Tim's personal locker in the break room for the gym staff. When Tim saw us enter the break room, he became very nervous and eyed the police officers with obvious fear in his eyes. Since the signal told them that one of my items was in his locker, he was forced to open it and revealed not only the watch that I had put the AirTag in, but the watch that my father had given me, along with dozens of other items that people had reported missing. But that was just the tip of the iceberg, though. On a separate shelf, there were boxes and boxes, all containing illegal steroids that Tim had been illegally selling to people at the gym. After a few tense minutes, Tim said that he and Freddie had been selling steroids at the gym for years, and that was why he protected him. They had made a lot of money from selling the drugs, and he wanted to protect his investment. The police dragged him away, and then we followed the signal to the other AirTag, which led straight to Freddie's car. After some effort, the police managed to break into his truck, and we saw that much like Tim's locker that the trunk was full of stolen goods, along with illegal steroids. As the police were combing through the items inside the trunk, Freddie came outside and saw the police. As quickly as he could, he leapt into his car and started it up and tried to race away. The police jumped into their cars and chased after him, and he led them on a wild car chase for a couple hours that ended with him crashing his car. He was then taken into custody. In the aftermath, the majority of the belongings that people had stolen from them were returned, and of course the gym fired Tim and permanently terminated Freddie's membership. But the real sweet revenge came from the criminal charges that both men received. Tim ended up serving 10 years behind bars for the sale of the steroids, and an additional 4 years for his role in covering up and participating in the various crimes at the gym. The videos that I had Stacy copy for me played a big role in revealing the extent of their crimes. For Freddie, though, he was given the same, but then an additional 3 years for fleeing from the police and leading them on a dangerous car chase through town. I had originally just wanted to get rid of a bully, but I ended up bringing down a drug ring in the process. I would be lying if I said that that part didn't make me feel pretty happy with Plan. In fact, the gym gave me a free lifetime membership in honor of the role that I played, and also gave Stacy a very healthy raise and promotion as well, both of which made Stacy extremely happy. So much so that she has worked there ever since, and proudly proclaims that she loves her job and would never leave that place in a million years. I later heard Freddie tried to bully an inmate, and the inmate and his friends beat him up, causing Freddie to lose one of his eyes. So now my friends and I get to go to the gym and enjoy our workout sessions, free from any bullies or the fear of being targeted by thieves. It's a win-win situation. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment. Charlotte had agreed to bring him in the afternoon on Friday, but instead of her, it was the police who showed up at my house. What seems to be the problem, officers? You. We've received multiple reports that you've been more than a year without paying child support. What? That can't be. I've been keeping up with those payments. I can even show you the receipts. We've already taken a look at your ex-wife's accounts. and we've noticed there have been no incoming payments from you. If you want to show us your receipts, go ahead, but I doubt they'll show anything relevant." To my frustration, the police were right. My payment receipts were useless. Apparently, my ex had deceived me, asking me to deposit the child support money into an unrelated account that wasn't hers and couldn't be traced. All this to get me into trouble with the law and extract even more money from me. Hi, my name is Eric. I had been dating Charlotte, my girlfriend at the time, for a while when she confessed she was pregnant with my child. It was a surprise because we were both careful to prevent this sort of thing from happening. But after the initial shock, I accepted it without much trouble. Contraceptives fail, and if Charlotte wanted to have a child, I was okay with it. We weren't married or even living together, but we both had stable jobs and knew we could provide for the baby when it arrived.
You'll see how you'll get used to the idea. And when the baby is here, you'll even wonder why we didn't try to have one sooner.
I doubt that'll happen in the first year, with all the things we'll have to adjust and our period of getting used to the new circumstances. But once I get used to it, sure, why not?
We'll be a perfect family, you'll see. Have some faith.
Maybe not much else, but faith I had in abundance. During those months of pregnancy, and even a little afterward, once Henry was born and some more time had passed, Charlotte and I were at our best. We were both on top of things, taking care of each other and preparing for the arrival and subsequent upbringing of our child together. We took some well-deserved vacations when we could, renovated the house so that tasks would be out of the way once we were busy again, and complimented each other doing household chores as if we'd been cooperating for decades. It was wonderful, and if I ever doubted that we were rushing things by moving in together, having a child, and becoming a happy family after Charlotte and I had only known each other for 2 months, my doubts soon evaporated. Perhaps, in hindsight, I should have been suspicious that something was amiss. Not because of what Charlotte was doing, but because of the attitude Alice, Charlotte's sister, seemed to have taken towards me on each of her visits.
I bet Eric doesn't help you with anything around the house. At most, he puts some of his salary towards buying diapers for Henry.
Oh, but he does help me. In fact, he's very helpful. For a moment, we thought we'd need to hire domestic help, but in the end, it wasn't necessary.
Now that's a surprise. Don't take offense, Eric, but I've heard from many friends stories of women getting pregnant and their partners leaving them without a second thought.
I understand the concern, but I'm not like that.
No, we know you're not. Don't mind my sister. Ah, do you hear that? Henry's crying. He must have woken up from his nap. Why don't you go see what he needs?
As the months passed and Henry grew, I realized Charlotte was attending to him less and less. It's not that she was neglecting him per se, but if I was home at the same time as her, 90% of the time when the baby cried, it was me who took on the responsibility of attending to him. And no, I didn't mind at first, because I already considered Henry my son and saw it as a blessing to spend so much time with him. But I couldn't ignore the patterns of behavior of my girlfriend. Not only did she pawn off the child whenever she could, but she also seized any excuse to be away from him. She was increasingly leaving the house, either with her sister or her own friends, leaving me or a nanny to care for the baby. I think we should resolve this. You know, I don't mind doing my part in parenting. In fact, I'm happy to participate. But I get the impression that you're not interested in doing yours.
How dare you? Are you saying I don't care about my son? You should be ashamed to even insinuate that.
I'm not saying that. It's just that maybe we should distribute the workload more evenly. I'm not telling you that you can't go out and have fun whenever you want.
You'd better not. I hope you're not proving Alice right, that you're not worth it, neither as a partner nor for raising a child together. And speaking of Henry, I think it's time for his meal.
Charlotte only tended to him after we argued, briefly, to prove her point that she wasn't a negligent mother. But afterward, once the attention wasn't on her anymore, she reverted to being the same neglectful person as always. Not only did she go out whenever she pleased, barely stopping to make sure there was someone to take care of Henry in her absence, but she had also started asking me for more and more money for her expenses. At first, I thought it was for the child, as she claimed, but once I checked the accounts, I was confronted with the reality. No, only a small portion of all that money I gave her actually went towards Henry. The rest she spent on herself. I endured in that relationship for a couple more years, for the sake of our child, but in the end, I couldn't take it anymore, and we separated. By law, she got custody, and I had to pay child support to ensure Henry lacked nothing. Henry could come to visit me every weekend at my new apartment, and in fact, that day when chaos arrived at my doorstep, it was precisely the child I was expecting. Charlotte had agreed to bring him in the afternoon on Friday, but instead of her, it was the police who showed up at my house. What seems to be the problem, officers? You. We've received multiple reports that you've been more than a year without paying child support. What? That can't be. I've been keeping up with those payments. I can even show you the receipts. We've already taken a look at your ex-wife's accounts, and we've noticed there have been no incoming payments from you. If you want to show us your receipts, go ahead, but I doubt they'll show anything relevant. To my frustration, the police were right. My payment receipts were useless. Apparently, my ex had deceived me, asking me to deposit the child support money into an unrelated account that wasn't hers and couldn't be traced. All this to get me into trouble with the law and extract even more money from me. I knew that my money did reach Charlotte for child support, as Henry lived well, lacking nothing. And Charlotte could even afford to not work or work fewer hours than she used to. It's just that my money was being obtained by another means of which I had no idea. The authorities, seeing that my story didn't match the documents, took me to court, and I ended up in jail for that alleged non-payment that never happened. It was a terrible few months for me, though fortunately, I was able to hire a good defense lawyer. Have you ever considered getting a DNA test? No. Why would I do that? I've never doubted that the child is mine. Maybe you should. I've been reviewing the case and I don't like it at all. I don't think it's far-fetched that your ex has been deceiving you to get your money. What do you recommend I do besides the test? Perhaps we should thoroughly investigate her, find out what she's up to, not just now, but before. It's likely we'll uncover some dirty tricks, especially since she already deceived you with the accounts. My legal team was right, of course. I got out of prison quickly, without even needing to go to trial, because after investigating a bit more deeply, they realized that the account I was sending the child support money to belonged to Alice, who very cleverly kept quiet about receiving these sums and had been secretly passing that money on to Charlotte. To make matters worse, the DNA test revealed that Henry wasn't mine, but someone else's, whom I later found out still had dealings with Charlotte. It seems it was all a strategy from the beginning to get me behind bars, for hurting her pride by leaving her and demanding that she respect my rights, and meanwhile, extracting more money from me. Fortunately, now justice was on my side, and after reporting her and exposing all the deception she orchestrated against me, it was Charlotte who was arrested. Alice wanted to fight for custody of the child, but she too was convicted for her participation in the scheme and forced to pay the corresponding fine. I would like to obtain custody of Henry, now that his mother and aunt will spend some time behind bars. Are you sure? You don't have any responsibility towards him anymore. In fact, the judge has already ruled that Charlotte must return all the child support money you gave her, plus a considerable compensation for everything she put you through. I still want custody, even though we're not related by blood. I was the one who cared for Henry the most in his early years. I consider him family, and I wouldn't want to lose contact. Not to mention, I was worried about what would become of him if I didn't obtain his legal custody. I didn't trust Charlotte's family, nor Henry's biological father, who, as far as I knew, had also been taking advantage of me in his own way, spending my money and seeing my ex behind my back. And I feared that Charlotte would soon be released from prison and return to her old tricks. The latter wouldn't happen, as my ex got a hefty sentence. Although it was the first time she had orchestrated a deception of these proportions, she was no stranger to trying to scam people for personal gain. I had no trouble obtaining full custody of Henry, which was a relief. I believe it was beneficial for both Henry and me. It turned out that Charlotte had continued to neglect Henry, often going on vacations with Henry's biological dad using the money I sent. Sometimes, she would leave Henry all alone at home. Despite this, Henry consistently showed a preference for me. Hence, when he separated from his mother, he didn't really miss her. On the contrary, the child adapted quickly to living with me, in a home that turned out to be much healthier than what he was used to. I filed a case against Henry's biological father for conniving with my ex and defrauding me, and he too was arrested. Not only did I ensure justice was served for the son I ended up adopting, but my ex also lost her freedom and her chance to claim Henry ever again, as I made her sign a document where she forever renounced custody, in exchange for forgiving her a small part of her debt to me. Meanwhile, Henry and I were able to start a new life together, as the family we were always meant to be. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more stories.
He was holding her hand tightly, almost crushing her little fingers to keep her from running to me. "How dare you hit a 10-year-old little girl?" I scream. Marina began to yell back at me, waving her arms angrily at me. With her arms in the air, her sleeves rolled down, and I saw her bare arms. They were covered in track marks, the telltale sign of a heroin user. "You degenerate drug addict. You're still using, aren't you?"
What? Oh no, you're accusing me of that, in my own house.
With that, she jumped at me and knocked me over. She grabbed my hair and hit my head repeatedly against the cold hardwood floor. I started to black out, too weak to fight her off of me. Suddenly, she was pushed off of me. First, I thought Mason had finally came to his senses and was the one fighting her. As I began to see again, I realized that he still stood at the foot of the stairs, just watching all of us. Kinsley had pushed her off of me. I quickly turned to look at Marina. She was leaning over Kinsley, her face red with anger. She was preparing to hit my poor daughter, when I hit her first, hard to her stomach with a bat I found in their hallway. She immediately fell to the floor, holding her stomach. Her groans finally made Mason move, and he rushed to her side. "My name is Audrey, and I thought my nightmare ended 4 years ago when I divorced my husband Mason. Unfortunately, it was just the start of another one. I filed for a divorce because I caught him sneaking around with another woman behind my back. Actually, my 10-year-old daughter Kinsley caught him. How horrible is it to discover your father with another woman and then have to tell your mother about it? I still feel so guilty for not seeing the signs sooner. I could have prevented her from going through that pain. Sometimes as a mother, you have to accept that you can't protect your child from everything. My therapist had to tell me that a lot after the divorce." Shortly after the divorce was finalized, Mason publicly announced the woman that he had been cheating on me with to be his girlfriend. Her name was Marina. Marina and Mason. Of course, I was humiliated, but I kept it to myself. The only contact that I had with him was when I dropped Kinsley off at his house for the one weekend a month that he got her. In the court hearings, he didn't get full custody, but a weekend visitation. I wasn't happy with it, but I still wanted my daughter to have some relationship with her father, even if he was a lying, cheating scumbag. He's still her father, after all. My therapist had to convince me of the importance of their relationship, despite how angry I still was with him. After some time, though, I realized that something weird was happening when Kinsley would go to visit her father. She would come back silent and would barely talk or look at me. She would only wear long sleeves that covered her arms and legs. This happened for several weeks before I finally decided to talk to her about it. "What's wrong, sweetheart? You always look so sad whenever you come back from your father's house."
It's his girlfriend. She's mean to me, bosses me around, and makes me do hard chores around the house.
"Well, you need to do chores sometimes, sweetie." "But she's mean to you?"
Yeah. I'm scared of her. She hits me sometimes too.
"What? Have you told your dad about this?"
Yeah, and he doesn't care. He keeps saying it's just my imagination, and I'm lying because she's not you.
It all started to make sense. Whenever I would drop Kinsley off, I would see her tense up as if she was afraid. I already didn't like Marina, much less trust her, after she ruined my marriage. But this an entirely different matter. My daughter's safety would always come before any personal issues I have with someone. I told Kinsley that I would talk to her father and get things straightened out for her. I called Mason that evening and talked to him. "Do you know what your daughter said to me? She said that she doesn't feel safe in your house because of your girlfriend. She told me that she hits her."
I wish she would have said something to me about it. I promise you, everything is fine over here, and she's in perfectly safe hands when she's with me. A little discipline never hurt anybody.
"How can I trust you not to lie? You've lied to me before about Marina. Our divorce ringing any bells?"
A little discipline and hard work won't hurt anybody. You should be thanking me that she's getting it somewhere. You're just trying to start trouble so that you can take away what little time I get to have with my daughter. I won't let you take her from me, Audrey. I love Marina now. Get over it.
I hung up the phone. I was tired of talking to him. He clearly wasn't listening. That was just the first of many phone calls that I had with him. Each time I tried to ask him more about Marina, he wouldn't tell me anything, and kept telling me that Kinsley was fine, that she was only lying so that she could go back home to spend more time with me. You are the favorite parent after all, Audrey. She's 10. I wouldn't put it past her. I gave up trying to reason with him. If I was going to protect my daughter, I needed to do some snooping of my own. I couldn't keep Kinsley from seeing her father, but I could get her a better phone so she had a more reliable way to contact me if anything happened while at his house. I put off the monthly visitation for as long as I could, waiting until the very last weekend of the month. There were a few times where I was in the driveway of their house, and I could hear the two of them screaming at each other before I dropped her off. I felt so uneasy about the whole situation, but I really couldn't do anything about it. I did my best to be patient, and gathered as much information as I could. I talked to Mason's neighbors about the two of them, and they said that they've had to call the police a couple of times to file noise complaints. Apparently, a few weeks prior, the two of them had gotten into a huge fight with each other. It ended with Marina pushing Mason down a flight of stairs. He didn't press any charges, so nothing changed about their situation. I also found out that Marina had a past of drug addiction. When I talked to Mason about it, he swore up and down that she had been clean and sober for years. In January, I tried to do my usual of waiting until the last week of the month for Kinsley to visit her dad, but I got really sick. I kept fainting and was too lightheaded to even walk. I had to make a tough decision. I couldn't take care of Kinsley while I was sick like this. Against my better judgment, I called Mason and asked him to come pick up Kinsley, and he did. She had been gone for roughly 4 hours before she called me. She was panicking, whispering into the microphone.
Mom, I know you're sick, but I really want to come home. Marina hates me for no reason, Mom.
Why? What happened?
Marina made me make dinner like she usually does. And when I sat down to eat with them, she screamed that I shouldn't be sitting at the table with them at all. She hit me really hard, knocking the sauce on my plate all over the floor.
She hit you?
Yeah.
Where's your father? Did you tell him about what's going on?
Yes, but he said she was just disciplining me. I started crying and couldn't stop, so he locked me in this closet. It's so dark and I'm really scared, Mommy.
In the background of the call, I heard Marina screaming at the top of her lungs.
You naughty little sack of crap! I told you not to use that stinkin' phone in there. Your stupid father should have taken that away from you. Let's see how well it works when I smash it to bits.
I had read stories of mothers performing crazy feats of strength when their child was in trouble. I could only imagine it before, but this was the moment where I experienced it firsthand. Mason lived 2 hours away. As sick I was, I drove to go pick up my daughter that night. It didn't matter that I didn't have enough strength to change out of my pajama pants anymore. Fighting against the nausea and the dizziness was almost too easy because I was filled with so much anger. I sped the whole way there. I busted through the door. Marina came around the corner of the living room and began screaming at me. Mason came down the stairs holding Kinsley's hand. At first glance, it might have looked like a loving father providing support for his daughter in a scary situation, but I knew better. He was holding her hand tightly, almost crushing her little fingers to keep her from running to me. "How dare you hit a 10-year-old little girl?" I scream. Marina began to yell back at me, waving her arms angrily at me. With her arms in the air, her sleeves rolled down, and I saw her bare arms. They were covered in track marks, the telltale sign of a heroin user. "You degenerate drug addict. You're still using, aren't you?"
What? Oh no, you're accusing me of that, in my own house.
With that, she jumped at me and knocked me over. She grabbed my hair and hit my head repeatedly against the cold hardwood floor. I started to black out, too weak to fight her off of me. Suddenly, she was pushed off of me. First, I thought Mason had finally came to his senses and was the one fighting her. As I began to see again, I realized that he still stood at the foot of the stairs, just watching all of us. Kinsley had pushed her off of me. I quickly turned to look at Marina. She was leaning over Kinsley, her face red with anger. She was preparing to hit my poor daughter when I hit her first, hard to her stomach with a bat I found in their hallway. She immediately fell to the floor, holding her stomach. Her groans finally made Mason move, and he rushed to her side. I grabbed Kinsley's hand, spat on their floor, and ran out the house. In the driveway, we called the police. When they arrived, they talked with the four of us. They lied, claiming that Marina never attacked us. Thankfully, the officer only had to take one look at my swollen and bloody face to tell that they were lying. The injuries were to the back of my head, and there was a little dent in the floor from where she banged my head onto the floor. Fortunately, I was able to protect Kinsley from being attacked again. With the police report and the Child Protection Services report, there was enough evidence to punish the two of them, despite all of their blatant lying. Mason lost all custody of Kinsley and had to pay a crazy expensive fine for child endangerment. It was such a large fine that he couldn't pay it all before the deadline. This happened for months, and the interest fees got larger and larger until he couldn't even make a dent in how much he owed. His solution was to try to sell some of the heroin that Marina had left behind. In a drug deal that went wrong, he tried to trick someone into paying 3 times more money than he should have, and the buyer caught on. The man was so angry that he crippled Mason's right hand with a pipe, the same hand that he used to try to keep Kinsley from running to me that night. Marina was found guilty of child abuse for beating Kinsley, and was sent to prison for 10 years. For the first few weeks after the trial, she had to stay in the hospital before being transferred to the prison. When I had hit her with the bat, it had cracked a couple of her ribs. She stayed in the state hospital for months before being transferred to the prison's hospital. When she finally got there, she ended up still being a danger, just to herself this time. She turned to other inmates to be her source for drugs and alcohol while she was in prison. Apparently, someone had taught her how to make wine in the toilet, but she had missed a crucial step and ended up severely poisoning herself and died in the prison's infirmary. As for me and Kinsley, without those two psychos in our lives, we were finally able to live together in peace. My brother had heard of the fiasco that had happened with her father and volunteered to step in Kinsley's life so that she could have a positive male role model. It's made such a difference. He's been helping me with chores around the house, supporting Kinsley with school, and even helps out with our finances. I've never seen Kinsley happier in her life, and seeing her happy makes me happy. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.